Welcome to Podcast Awesome, where we chat about icons, design, tech, business, and nerdery with members of folks that are on the Fun Awesome team and also within the expanding Awesomeverse. I'm your host, Matt Johnson, and today I'm chatting with Zach Leatherman, creator of Eleventy, about the realities of funding open source projects without burning out or selling your soul. We dig into sustainability, community culture, and what it actually takes to keep open source healthy for the long haul. Zach, Mr. Eleventy, I don't know if they call you Mr. Eleventy. Thank you for coming on Podcast Awesome once again. Always enjoy our conversations. And I thought it'd be fun to catch up with you on all things Eleventy and what's going on in your world. We had some chats recently about how founders of projects struggle to balance their personal lives. They're doing a side passion project in the open source community, but they want to give more to it. Sometimes it's an issue of funding and time. How do you manage all that? You've been at this for a while with Eleventy, and I'm curious about how do you think about funding it and sustaining it and trying to build it over time? Those are big questions, but I just thought I would kick it off.
Yeah, I think that when it comes to open source sustainability, there's a whole bunch of different types of projects that people can build. Everybody kind of has their own idea of when you talk about open source, what that means. And I think Eleventy is a very specific type of project in that it's a tool. It's a larger scoped tool, even though we try to keep it as simple as possible. It's a fairly big project in terms of it's not like a small little package that exists that you can sort of maintain independently. It's a project that needs dedicated development resources, and it's 8 years old now. We've gone through a whole bunch of different eras of funding and maintainability, and in the beginning it was just like this small sort of project, and it grew over time, and more people used it over time. In the beginning of the project, in the first couple of years, we were being used by different Google properties, which had its own complications, I think, in terms of expectations and scope and maintenance, and there's just a lot that goes into that. And so at that time, it was still a side project. There were sort of a lot of conversations about what it's like to be taken on by this huge mega corporation and used as part of their publishing process. It's just a side project at that point. I think just even in that early days, there were some, I don't want to say naivety, like maybe I was a little naive in terms of I didn't understand when I started the project what it could grow into, and dealing with those changes in how I perceived the project and its role and responsibility has been mind-blowing to me personally. I do take a lot of pride in the stability of the project, and I take that very seriously. But there is that tension between how much can you give away and how much is fair to give away.
Yeah, I'd imagine there would be a real thrill to realizing, oh, I got a project off the ground. Wow, people are using it. This is great. People that are part of the community that are helping with this. And then I imagine at some point you go, oh man, people are really counting on me to because they're using it. They're counting on me to maintain it. And how does that, you're a busy guy, you're a husband and a dad, and you got stuff going on. How do you juggle that when life is continuing on as normal,
Yeah, I mean, it's fascinating because I originally started this project as a stress coding project when my daughter was very young. When she'd go down for a nap, I'd work on the project, and it was sort of fitting in the development and maintenance of it just in that downtime when she was a baby. Seeing the project and growing with the project as both of my kids have grown has been a unique challenges in itself. I have a lot of opinions because I was a new parent when I started this too.
Right. Yeah.
There's some unique challenges with how much time you think you should have as a parent. When you have a new baby, I think you almost have more free time than when they're older because they nap and sleep a lot more. I was able to fit in hours of me time after my daughter had gone to bed, and it's not like that anymore.
Now there's soccer
The
practice.
kids are older, and there's more responsibilities and parenting responsibilities now too. So it almost became a wrestling match between what is fair for me to give in my free time versus my responsibilities to my family. That actually ties in directly to where I am now, working at Fun Awesome. I thought a lot about that because before I joined Fun Awesome, I remember having a specific conversation with my wife about I could bare knuckle this thing myself and I could make it through and the project would continue and it would be fine and people would continue to use it. But is that fair to me? Is that fair to the community participating? Because bare knuckling through and risking burnout and stress on my family is not a long-term sustainable choice for me as a person, let alone me as a maintainer of a project. So I think there's a lot of growth that happened over the years that has led me to where I am today.
Yeah, that's great. And we maybe have covered this before, but maybe we can hit on it briefly. Dave and Travis here at Fawn Awesome were aware of what you were doing, and there was some kind of kinship, like, oh, maybe we're thinking about open source in a similar way, and maybe we can help each other. Can you tell that story? How did that conversation start, and what was sort of the discovery process in those conversations?
I had been familiar with Fun Awesome from previous Kickstarters that the company had done around. There was like a Fun Awesome 5 release that had a Kickstarter to it. And more recently, the Web Awesome project pivoted from Shoelace to a Kickstarter to be a more sustainable open source project. At Fun Awesome, there is a very big focus on sustainable and thriving open source projects and how to fund those so that people can be whole human beings and not give up their entire personal lives in sacrifice of an open source project. That has been a very healthy change for me. I can feel the stress of maintaining a project by myself start to dissipate, which feels like I'm becoming a healthier human being. I can feel that the weight isn't solely on my shoulders anymore, which is a very good feeling. We're working towards a sustainable future for Eleventy right now.
Maybe we could back up a little bit. You were educating me on different models that people have to think through. Companies that get acquired by a bigger company, like venture capital models, because a huge part of this is like, how do you fund a project, keep it sustainable, keep moving forward? And there's a lot of ways to think about that. I mean, some people will just keep something open source. It's part of the open source community and they kind of grind away at it. But some folks want to move it forward to sort of the next level, but there can be sort of built-in pitfalls to how people approach this. Or can you give sort of a high level perspective on how you think about that, or things you've been seeing on the news with companies that have merged with other companies and things like that?
Yeah, I mean, I do remember earlier in Eleventy's just evolution, going to sort of the Jamstack conference in 2020 and hearing about Gatsby's $15 million investment. In my mind, there was a lot of overlap between what Gatsby was doing and what Eleventy was doing, and people saw them as competitors. There's a sort of a different technical argument to make that they sort of were all in on single page applications and Eleventy was more static sites, but like less client rendered in that way. And there's been a bunch of evolutions in the server-side rendering space there, but I don't want to get too much in the technical weeds. I do remember the vibe of that conference was, wow, look at this huge investment that these venture capitalists have added to Gatsby and how it's going to sort of bolster their development and allow them to grow and allow them to move forward in a great way. And I remember thinking at the time that it started the clock. Whenever you take investment, it starts the clock on when your investors want to be compensated. I remember thinking that was like 5 or 6 years ago.
It seems like you're stepping into high risk, high reward. If there's a high reward, it seems like a pretty big gamble.
Yeah. And I think that style of investment demands that hockey stick growth and profitability. And that's the higher risk associated there. If you don't hit those unicorn numbers, then they're not going to give you more investment because they sort of see the writing on the wall. And I think for tools of this nature, I don't think hockey stick growth is a possibility. I think profitability is a possibility, but when you take that money, the hockey stick growth has not played out successfully yet. And we've seen the repercussions of that over and over again. Gatsby sold to Netlify, and it sort of languished over the last 2 years. And then Astro just sold to Cloudflare a couple weeks back. So it's clear that they ran out of money and needed to sell to a larger company. My hunch is that it goes back to those hockey stick profitability expectations.
Have you had certain opportunities for funding that you had to navigate through and figure out like any lessons learned along the way through that? Or has it mostly been like you observing things like this and saying like, okay, well, I'm building my own philosophy about this. How do you think about all that?
Yeah, I mean, there have been days where I thought I was making the right choice and days where I thought that I haven't made the right choices over time. I remember getting emails from venture capital folks years ago after other venture capital folks had invested in Gatsby and not pursuing that route because I had those feelings at the time. But I will say, seeing Astro's sort of rocket ship growth and how they took however many $1 million of investment and seeing how they were able to fund their framework for years. So there were days in those 4 years where I was like, oh, maybe it's going to pay off for them. I certainly feel like more like I have made the right choice with their current sale, even though that might be a spicy thing to say. The tone of the announcements were between the Gatsby acquisition and to Netlify and the Cloudflare acquisition of Astro felt very similar to me. We promise we're going to keep sustaining the open source framework, but it's not directly tied to our bottom line in any way. It's just sort of like this charity-based contribution to open source. I've been burned by that before. We were sort of part of Netlify for a while, and they were full-time funding the project. But again, we weren't tied to their bottom line. So when the chips go down, or times get tight or circumstances change, and you're sort of the first thing on the chopping block because you aren't contributing to the bottom line. That has evolved my feelings over time, in that the best way to sustain an open source project is to have a symbiotic relationship with the company you're working with. You need to have a direct contribution to the bottom line, and the profitability of the company needs to be tied to the project in some way. What FontAwesome has done with the FontAwesome project and the WebAwesome project has shown success there. Yeah, even through the Kickstarters and funding the project in that way has shown that this model works and is working. So I think FontAwesome is doing a very unique thing here, and I'm proud to be a part of it.
When it comes to the open source community in general, I imagine there's a lot of strong opinions about these things in the open source community. And are there folks that are sort of more purists about open source stuff? Like, oh, don't be a sellout. Like, don't like, oh, so-and-so's trying to fund their project and they're holding their cards close to their chest. Are there different factions in the open source community about how people debate this stuff?
Yeah, I mean, I think there are a lot of strong opinions when it comes to open source generally. I think the biggest issue is that even in this conversation, We've talked about different methods that folks have tried, but I don't feel like the most successful projects have had the most sustainable outcomes. And that's probably why there's still so much controversy around this topic, is that it does feel like the popular way is not the successful way.
Mm-hmm.
And that's why folks are probably going to continue to debate things and argue about things until those two things match up in a nicer way. The different funding models that folks have tried are almost tied to the people running the projects and the kinds of projects. Like I do think that just the Vue community specifically has been a very unique outlier in terms of how they've funded their things and grown sustainably funded their stuff. But even like the original maintainer of Vue has sort of joined a different, or he created a different company recently to make more pro developer tools and took some investment there. So we'll see how that plays out, because that has some writing on the wall implications to it as well.
Right.
But yeah, I think there's going to be a lot of people disagreeing about how everyone else does it. But until the rubber meets the road, it's hard to know who's right. It feels as though that is credible evidence building up that at least I'm a little bit right in my hunches and suspicions about the best way forward. But
Yeah.
it hasn't been all roses for me either. So,
Oh, sure. This reminds me of cultural and community oriented stuff and strong opinions about how a project moves forward, having it funded and sustainable related to, like, say, the music scene. So, in a past life, I'm still actively playing music, but back in the day I was touring and putting out records. And there were a lot of opinions in those communities, especially if you go back to like the early to mid 90s when underground music was starting to hit mainstream radio play and the music that was blowing up. There were such strong opinions about all that stuff. And there were kind of these purists that were like, no, you have to stay independent and never let a corporation dictate what you're going to do creatively. I would tend to side on that in one sense, but there's also the reality as much as your life gets more complicated and then eventually you're not a single person anymore. You're starting your family, all that stuff. You have these huge considerations of like, okay, we can continue to slug it out doing things independently. And on the one end, you have, sell your soul to the corporate entity, and eventually it's going to cause this whole project to collapse because it's so frustrating and they just dump you. There's not hockey stick growth, right?
Yeah.
And there are those rare occasions where somebody emerges out of that. They kind of roll the dice and, wow, wouldn't you know it, they got a radio hit. I see all these parallels with that. People get so entrenched in their point of view that they're not really creative about thinking about a way forward. And like, it's not like evil to try and monetize something in a sustainable way if you can continue to build something that's meaningful, still really means something to the community, and you're providing something extra if they want to take advantage of that. When you met with Dave and Travis, what were sort of like the shared values you guys discovered when you started that conversation, thinking about sustainability and these kinds of issues?
Just to revisit the point that you made, I do remember that in the software world. Like I came up during the Microsoft Bill Gates era, and I remember being around very smart people that had very strong opinions about Microsoft and the profitability of software and charging for the software that you write.
Right.
And yeah, I feel like there's a huge overtone to that, because I think that Microsoft probably did some, I don't want to say shady things, but maybe some unethical things to make money back in that time.
Right.
But it isn't black and white situation. It isn't an all or nothing situation. You can charge for things in an ethical way.
Mm-hmm.
And it doesn't have to be, oh, if you're charging money for your software, that is an evil thing. That I think is a thing I had to internalize over time, just in terms of the code I'm writing as an open source maintainer. How much do you want to give away? How much is sustainable to give away. And I think that's the thing that Dave and Travis already had a lot of experience with, just in terms of the Font Awesome icon set. There's a ton of icons given away for free, but that doesn't mean you can't build a sustainable project around it. And you've seen that play out in the pro tier and the different pro icon sets that have come out. You can have a part of your project be a paid part, and people are interested in investing in the future of the project when they pay for the project. But it's not that investment that requires hockey stick growth. It's an investment that requires, I just want you to be around in 5 years. And that's sort of, I think, there's a tension in how people are raising money in open source now, because we tried to do just open source contributions. Like, people could support us on Open Collective, and that still exists. People can still do that, and that's a nice way to contribute to the project. But I want you to exist. It's not like a direct investment in the future of a sustainable project if those contributions don't hit a certain monetary level to pay for a salary, you know? And the scope of Eleventy, that's the other nuance here, is the scope of Eleventy is big enough that it requires a lot of development time to keep it going. The other part of open source that is different in this discussion is that an Astro or a Gatsby or an Eleventy or a Next.js requires full-time engineering to keep moving forward and be a maintained project. When you hit that level of scope, the sustainability question becomes much different, and the discussions become much different because the scope of the project is bigger. I do think that Dave and Travis specifically have a track record of doing this successfully with projects, and that was something that I was interested in joining.
There's so much room for creative thinking in this stuff, and it's not sort of this, one size fits all way of doing things. Again, it's so funny to see like the parallels between a world that I'm familiar with and this world, where I get where people are coming from, where they're like total purists about their art, and they're like, I'm not going to allow anything to cloud my vision for this. And it's like, that's cool. And it's not like necessarily the answer is like sell your soul to the big bad corporation so that you can fund something. But I love that Dave and Travis and other individuals in this community are thinking creatively about how to move things forward. I've heard Travis say many times, I can't remember if this is exactly how he says it. The idea is like, our biggest competitors are free products. And there's so much to that when you peel it apart a little bit. Like, we're able to continue to grow the free product because of this creative thinking on this model. If Dave had kept this an individual project, and of course he's getting help from the open source community, but if he was really precious about it, there wouldn't be as much free stuff. There wouldn't be as much available in Font Awesome had they not figured out a way to springboard into the next iteration of the company by actually monetize having a pro version. Now, like you said, like folks that are signing up for pro, they're basically investing in the future of the open source aspect of this company. So it's kind of best of both worlds as far as I can see it.
Yeah, I mean, when I try to divide what's the difference between giving $5 a month to an open source project on Open Collective or GitHub sponsors versus what Font Awesome is doing, you're getting pro stuff back. You're getting value for your money. And it doesn't feel like, at least I would expect that it doesn't feel like, as a person contributing money, that relationship feels healthier to me, that I'm getting pro features back for the money that I'm contributing. And that, to me, you're getting more value. It seems like you're going to stick around, but also that the free version grows for everyone. So it's like you're part of this bigger thing. And it's not just that you're giving money to a free version of a thing to exist. It's that you're giving money, getting stuff back, and investing for everyone. So It really does feel like a very unique thing that I'm watching play out. It's not like this imaginary pipe dream that we're talking about here. No, it's working. It's been working for years. The formula is there. The more projects that we can get using this formula instead of trying to build a community around charitable donations, I think the better open source software will be.
That makes a lot of sense. Almost like a form of accountability in a sense. Because if you have an open source project and somebody's basically giving you a charitable donation, that's nice. I mean, that you're all helping each other out, but you can't exactly like tie that to an expectation that they're going to deliver on something. But if somebody's like, okay, I'm signed up for a program, the company is saying, we're going to deliver this. It's going to work when you need it. It's going to work well. And we're going to continue to add more value as time goes on. It's this sort of contract of like, great, I will continue to pay for that. That sounds fantastic. And I'm going to get more value out of that. It keeps everybody honest. It seems like it's a win-win for everybody.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think the other unique thing that I've noticed just being at Font Awesome for over a year now is that there is like humans doing support, which feels very unique for a business, but it's like unicorn status for open source projects.
Right.
You know, because it's mostly overworked maintainers trying to keep up, or a bot closing your issue when it becomes stale because they haven't had time to look at it. It really does feel like a unique and special thing. So
yeah, it's our little trademark, actual human support. Ding, got a little trademark on there. You send an email into hello@Font Awesome, and it's likely that Trevor is going to be the one answering. We know Trevor. We work with Trevor. He's a real person. He's not a robot.
Yeah, absolutely. I know Trevor's in a nice warm spot right now. So maybe not the happiest with his weather situation compared to mine, but it's fine. It's fine.
In the dead of winter. Yeah, he's living it up on the beach. This is all super interesting, Zach. Thanks for walking us through this. And can you tell us a little bit about what's on the horizon for Eleventy? What are you working on right now? And what are you hoping for and shooting for in the future?
Yeah, I mean, we're about to take some really big steps. Like 2026 is going to be one of the biggest years for the project we've ever had.
Nice.
And I'm super excited about it. So I think folks will learn what's next very soon. I'll just leave it at that for now.
Nice.
But we are moving forward to a sustainable future for the project. Feels like the beginning in some respects. So I'm very excited.
That's great. We're looking forward to what's coming too. And thank you so much for taking some time to talk through this stuff. If folks are curious about what Eleventy is up to currently, where should they go to get more information?
Our website is 11ty.dev. We have all of our social accounts linked up on the top. If you want to follow us on Blue Sky, Mastodon, YouTube, whatever. Yeah, it's all there. And fontawesome.com.
Thanks, Zach. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks.
A huge thanks to Zach Leatherman for sharing hard-earned lessons on open source sustainability, community trust, and building projects that last. If you care about open source and the humans behind it, this is definitely a conversation you're going to want to steep in. And per usual, Podcast Awesome was produced and edited by this guy right here, yours truly, Matt Johnson. The Podcast Awesome theme song was composed by Ronnie Martin. The music interstitials were composed by Zach Malm, and we get a little extra video editing help from Mr. Isaac Chase. All right, until next time, and you know what to do next. Go make something awesome.